Have you ever found yourself going through the motions of prayer or Torah study or mitzvah observance and feeling like you're just checking boxes, like you're totally disconnected from God who commanded us to do all these things, and that you're not building a relationship with Him, that is just a list of rules and instructions that you have to follow, that is not giving you that deeper meaning and connection in your life? Maybe you've yearned to develop a deep and intimate bond with the Almighty, but it's a challenge. It's certainly a challenge to develop that bond with the infinite, with the divine. Luckily, our sages have given us many tools, many techniques and strategies to help us build that elusive bond, that intimate relationship with God Himself. At its core, developing that intimate relationship with God is not going to be as much about the acts that you do or the words that you say, but about the intent, about the focus and the emotional bond that you develop through the actions and through the texts and the prayers. But focusing on the intent, focusing on the mental bond and that relationship that you're building with Him, the emotional bond, that's going to be where you really thrive in that relationship with God. And we're going to explore in this next class some of the different lessons that our sages teach us in a few different areas that we can use to help us build that bond, drawing on the classical sources, stop checking boxes and start living a life of intimacy with God, having real and deep relationship. And I want to focus on 3 areas. The first is elevating the physical acts that we do on our everyday life. The second is going to be prayer. And the third is going to be bitachon, trusting in God. The first and perhaps one of the most foundational principles in building that relationship with God is elevating the basic physical acts that you do every single day. Judaism is a unique religion. Most religions in the world believe either that you should indulge in physicality or you should be totally separate from physicality. And you should be abstaining from things. But Judaism teaches that that is not the correct way, neither of those ways. We don't abstain and we don't indulge. We elevate. We interact and we utilize and we enjoy the physical world that God has gifted us with by elevating it in the service of God. Your most mundane daily actions and interactions can be imbued with such a deep holiness and significance when you think about how they are directed towards God. Let's take food as an example. How do we approach food? If we would be abstaining from food, then we would be a religion that focuses on fasting. We have some fasts, but that's not what we're all about. We don't fast all the time. We don't encourage fasting all the time. And if we would be into indulging in food and we would be more hedonistic in that lifestyle, we would just be having massive parties all the time. But Judaism doesn't do that. It has an interesting balance of both feasting and fasting. And most of the time we do neither. Most of the time we just live regular lives. So how do we approach food? Well, the answer is that food is a beautiful gift that God has given us. And like any gift and any tool, it has to be used appropriately. And used appropriately means that you enjoy it and you realize that it's a gift from God and that it's there to sustain your body, to give it the strength so that it can be the vehicle for the soul to serve God. You can't pray, you can't learn Torah, you can't do good deeds, you can't be alive to build that relationship with God in this earth unless you're eating food. And God made food delicious, He made it enjoyable, He made so many different colors and flavors so that as a pure gift to us, we can enjoy this task that we have to do anyways. So if you take the food, which you have to eat anyways, and you realize that this is a gift from God, and this is an enjoyable gift from God, I'm grateful for it, and it gives me the capability of being able to serve Him, you have just elevated what could have been a totally mundane act into a totally spiritual, bonding relationship with God. You're realizing that this is from Him, you're appreciating it, and you're using it to further your service of Him. That's beautiful. And Judaism teaches that. And that's why we have fasts and feasts mixed together in our religion. Sometimes we fast, sometimes we feast. They're both holy. Fasting helps you abstain a little bit and remember that it's not just about eating the food. We eat food because it helps us serve God and we're grateful for it. And sometimes we fast. We're thinking about it. And we don't fast all the time either. Sometimes we really indulge, like on Purim, or the day before Yom Kippur, or every Shabbos and Yom Tov. We eat a lot and we enjoy it a lot. But we elevate it and we make it into a spiritual accomplishment. Little things like that, finding the spark of holiness in food or in any activity that you're engaged in can make you realize that you're not living a life of checking boxes. You're not just doing things one by one because that's what you were told to do. Everything that you do, certainly the mitzvahs that you perform, but even the mundane acts that you do are building a relationship with God. There's such depth and holiness to everything you do. And if you think about it, if the pizza that I'm eating can help me build a relationship with God because I'm grateful and I'm using it to serve Him, then certainly the prayer that I'm saying or the Torah that I'm learning or the lulav that I'm shaking, any one of the mitzvahs, a spiritual pursuit, how much more so is that going to help you deepen your relationship with God. Sometimes it's a lot easier to feel the meaning in our actions when we deal with kindness specifically. But I feel like kindness, acts of chesed specifically, have a special place in this lesson that we're talking about right now. Because when you're dealing with mundane acts, it's a little bit harder to feel how there's that spiritual component to them. And when you're dealing with spiritual acts, which are obviously very spiritual, it's a little bit harder to appreciate how much they're helping you and how spiritual they are and how you're building a relationship with God, because so many times it feels like you're just checking off the box. You don't feel it emotionally. But acts of kindness specifically seem to hold a very special middle ground. There's something that we easily identify with. There's something that emotionally we understand how they're impactful, and we understand how they're both regular acts that we would do for a friend while at the same time being acts of chesed, of kindness, that are commanded by God that we perform. Imagine a guy, let's call him David. And David is constantly studying Torah. He's constantly trying to do mitzvot. He's doing all the good deeds, but he's not feeling an emotional connection. He's not feeling that he's building a relationship with God. And then one day he decides, you know what? I'm going to start focusing on acts of kindness with the intent that that is going to help me build this relationship with God, because I feel the emotional impact of being kind to someone. And he starts holding open doors, giving charity, smiling to people in the street. He starts building and building and building this muscle of feeling that the mitzvahs that he's doing, because an act of kindness is certainly a mitzvah, it's an act of chesed. And he starts building this muscle of feeling that this is meaningful, this is deep, this is relationship building, this is transformational. And the more he does it, the more he realizes that everything he does in his service of God is really like that. Even if sometimes it's harder to feel, but he starts to know and believe and feel that it's there. And when he makes Kiddush on Shabbos, or when he blows the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, or when he refrains from driving a car on Shabbos, he's built up this muscle of understanding that following the commandments is impactful. And it's because you have a commandment from God who's directing you and you're responding to him. You're building a relationship through the acts that you do, the acts of service that you perform for others because of God's command, and acts of service that you perform for God. Building up that muscle and bringing that awareness to your life is one of the most basic, fundamental, and first things that you need to do in order to start building a relationship with him. It's never about checking the boxes, no matter when it feels like that. It's about listening to God because he's talking to you. And when you respond and listen to him, you're responding back to him. And with your acts that you do, whether it be a mundane act that you're elevating, an act of kindness that you're emotionally feeling its impact, or an act of Torah study or any other mitzvah, you're building that relationship with God, you're deepening your emotional connection. The second thing I want to focus on, which will help us deepen our relationship with God in a very simple way, is prayer. Prayer is literally when we talk to God. We sit down or we stand up and we have a conversation with him. How could there be anything better than that to help us build a relationship and an emotional connection? And the crazy part is that to so many people, prayer seems like you're just checking boxes. It's one of the hardest things. The thing which is designed to be the deepest and easiest, most accessible relationship with God, literally talk to God, has become not a conversation, has become just read the words because that's what you need to do. It's not supposed to be that way. We say, Mimamakim kirasicha Hashem. From the depths, I call out to God, the verse in Tehillim says. And the Baal Shem Tov and others explain, Mimamakim doesn't just mean from the physical depths, like a low place where you're in danger. It means from the depths of your soul. From the innermost part of your being, you're calling out to God. You're not just reading a text. You're thinking to yourself, this is God who I'm talking to. I, a human, have the ability to converse with the divine. It's a shocking revelation. And that should be able to deepen your relationship with God. It's one of the hardest tasks. Rabbi Victor Miller says that building up that talent, that skill, the awareness that I'm literally talking to God and feeling like I'm, as our sages say, Omed Lifnei HaMelech, standing before the king and having that conversation, is a lifetime of work. But it's something that we have to be striving for, something that needs to be on our minds, that that's what prayer is. But you've got to break out of the routine. I had a friend who used to tell me that I saw him do this in yeshiva. He would switch his sitter every week, every month, every couple of months. He would just get a new sitter because he felt that you're using the same sitter for a year or two or three or more at a time. It's a beautiful thing. Pages get worn, it's your sitter, but there's a bigger danger that you're going to fall into a routine. It's not fresh, it's not different, it's not exciting. This was his trick that he did, he would switch the siddur he was using, the prayer book, so that it was just different and helped him focus and helped him realize that this is not just saying things by memory, blah, 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 blah. This is actually talking to God. God, please heal these people. God, please send me financial stability. You're actually beseeching him. You're having conversation. I heard a story once about a man who was saying Birkat HaMazon, the blessing of thanks after eating bread, with such concentration and devotion. He was just sitting there totally focused, and someone walked into the room and tried to get his attention to ask him something, get some direction, and he didn't see him. He didn't realize he was there. And he said afterwards, the man who had been saying the blessing was startled to see someone waiting for him. He said, "I'm sorry, I was talking to God, and I was thanking him and praising him, and I was literally like I was having a conversation with him, that I was talking to God. I didn't notice there was someone else in the room." That's the level that we're striving for. And think about the emotional connection that you're going to build. Think about the depth of the relationship that you could build with God if you're actually having conversations with him, that you know that he's listening. We say that in our prayers all the time, that God listens to our prayers, but that means that you're talking to God when he's listening to your prayers. It's not like when you mumble through the words or you just say what you've got to say, then God hears you. God hears you means he's actually listening to what you're saying. So what are you saying? And there's different levels to this. There's simple translation of the words. That's also important. It's hard to have a conversation with someone if you don't know what you're saying. And that's something that we strive for as well. But beyond that, beyond knowing what you're saying, there's a much more, I think, fundamental idea, which is knowing that you're talking to someone. Even if you don't know what you're saying, if you're given a text and you're told, this is an important text that needs to be recited to this person who is listening to you, and you read through it and you just follow the transliteration to help you get through it, but you're still conveying a message. And imagine if someone was standing in front of you and you said these words to him that you were told to say, knowing that you didn't know what they meant, but knowing that they were being heard and that they were making an impact. That itself is going to already be very different than not even realizing what's going on and just ripping through the words because that's what you got to do. So when we talk about feeling like you're not building a relationship with God and that you're not accomplishing anything because you're just pushing buttons and you're just checking boxes, prayer is a great place to work on countering that feeling. Because prayer is a really, really, I would say, dangerous place for that to take place. It's so easy to fall into that trap of that being your prayers. And yeah, it will feel like you're doing it by route and that you're checking boxes and that you're not building a relationship. But that's not what prayer is supposed to be. Prayer is called tefillah. Tefillah comes from the Hebrew word, which means connection. Prayer is about connecting with God. Prayer is in place of sacrifices in the temple. A sacrifice is called a korban. Korban comes from the word karev, karov, close. It's about drawing close to God and connecting with him. The way to do that is by really understanding what you're saying and that someone, God, is listening to the words that have actual meaning. And then also, even more importantly, just thinking about the fact that God is listening to you when you pray. Before we go on to the third topic, just take a moment and think about when the last time was that you had an actual interactive, meaning interacting with God, prayer experience. When did you actually think, understand, and feel that someone, that God, was listening to your prayers and that they had meaning? The last of the three things I want to talk about in how to develop this relationship with God and stop checking boxes is bitachon. Bitachon means that you are trusting in God. Emunah, to put it very simply, is belief in God, and bitachon is trusting in God. Trusting means that you're living a life where you are aware of God, that you are aware that he is in control of everything that goes on in this world, including your personal life and including the entire global everything, and living your life with that reality at the forefront of your mind. God has an intricate plan for your entire life, for the history of humanity, and for your everyday activities as well. Even when we don't understand the greater purpose of tragedies or celebrations in society or in history, or in annoyances or successes in our personal lives, we know that God is there and we trust that God is the one who's running the show and is calling the shots and is doing everything for the benefit of mankind. Bitachon is very important. It's very important to stress that bitachon doesn't just mean that you trust that God is in charge and that God is running the show. It means that you understand that God is doing that for the benefit of mankind and for the benefit of each individual, and that everything that happens to everyone and to anyone happens because God willed it to be so, and God did it with our best interest in mind. When you live a life with bitachon, with an awareness that God is in control and cares about every tiny detail and is doing it, whatever happens, for your benefit, then of course you're going to start building that deeper relationship with him. Of course, things that I'm doing are going to stop being just by route, just things that I happen to do because God said so, because God's going to be an integral part of your life. Just like he is taking care of every single detail, the things that you do for God are also going to have deep meaning and significance. And I want to stress, knowing that God is in charge of every detail of your life and knowing that everything that happens is for your ultimate good does not mean that you're not going to struggle with things that take place that are hard, with tragedies, with setbacks, with frustrations. It doesn't mean that you're just suddenly going to be, oh, everything's okay, no issues, everything is from God and everything is perfect, everything is beautiful. That would be an extremely high level. But even the awareness that this is happening because God decided it's the best thing for you, and that I don't understand that, and that it's hard, and that I cry out to God and say, why is this happening? Why are you doing this to me? But realize that you just asked a question to someone. You're acknowledging that there's someone, God in this case, in every case, there is God who is doing this, and that there's a reason for it. And you don't know the reason. You're saying, why? What's the reason? But that means that there's a reason. You're asking a question, and that means there's an answer. And having that bitachon, not understanding of what's happening, but trust that God is doing it, even if you're questioning it, that builds a very deep relationship with God. Ultimately, whether it's through the mundane acts or the kind acts of your life, or through prayer, or through trusting God, I hope we can take away that building a relationship with God, living your life as a Jew, is supposed to be an inherently personal journey. It's not about checking boxes. It's not about following rules. It's about following your heart into a relationship with God. It's about making a commitment to live with intention. It's about being vulnerable in your prayer. It's about understanding that everything that happens is from God and having an unwavering faith and trust that everything that happens is for the ultimate good. I'll leave you with this. Hold on to the times where you felt an undeniably strong connection with God. Whether it was a moment in time where you experienced something, you felt something, a prayer, an act, a moment, hang on to those times, find one in the past, or look for one in the future, and let that connection, that spiritual charge, resonate in your soul, and let it expand into all the other areas of your life and all the other times in your life where you're seeking that connection with God. Find the moments where you experience it, create new moments to experience that connection, and you will very quickly start to realize how you can move away from living a life checking boxes to living a life of Judaism where you have an intimate, deep, and meaningful relationship with the Almighty. Please like, subscribe, and make sure you don't miss any future content.